This podcast is brought to you by sarahraven.com, which is home to everything you need for a truly beautiful and productive garden. You'll also find great and essential gardening kit and stylish, lovely things to have in your house to bring the outside indoors, all inspired by the garden and the house being tied together. There's also plenty of garden inspiration, how-to videos and specialist growing guides. So head over to sarahraven.com today to discover even more. Welcome to Grow, Cook, Eat, Arrange, the podcast of me, Sarah Raven, and today Josie Lewis, our head gardener at Perchill. And the reason Josie's with me is it's time to do our November jobs. So we're going to give you a highlight of the things that we're doing through this month in the garden at Perchill. And I'm going to kick off with an edible, and I am still sowing pea tips. Now, pea tips are the most delicious things, which are very, very expensive by the bag in the upmarket supermarkets. And do you know what? They are such a piece of cake to grow. You can actually go to the supermarket and just buy a box of marrowfat peas and use those. I tend to use the lovely one called Nairobi, because I just happen to have them here because it's my favourite pea in the entire world. It's unbelievably sweet and delicious sugar snap. But genuinely, it really doesn't matter because you're only harvesting them as a pea tip. So in a way, the cheaper the better. And all you need to do is either in a gutter or literally one of those wooden crates that you get from the greengrocer, or even a polystyrene crate that you get from a fishmonger. Fill it with compost, peat-free, of course, and then scatter them really quite densely over the top. And the more different containers you can do with your peas, the better, because they are completely delicious and you will be eating them for Christmas in salad or in a risotto. And obviously in salad, they're raw, but in a risotto, don't cook them because they just wilt to nothing. So you add them over your pasta or your risotto after you've taken it off the heat and taking it to the table. And it gives you this succulent, delicious, tender, sweet, unbelievably tasty pea-like flavour. And how do you grow them? Literally, as I say, just put them over the surface of your compost, cover them with the finest dusting of compost so that they're moist throughout the whole circumference. And they will be, put them somewhere with a bit of light and a little bit of warmth, so they could be on a window ledge or whatever, or if you've got a greenhouse or polytunnel, they will shoot within 4 to 5 days. You can start picking the harvest in 3 to 4 weeks, and you should get 2 or possibly even 3 harvests from them. So I really recommend if you're someone who loves fresh, crunchy, tasty, delicious salads and things over Christmas to give you a bit of healthy tastiness, pea tips are the thing to go for.
Yes, nice to have something green at this time of year. So I'm going to focus on soil. We tend to leave a lot of our perennials and grasses and other things standing around the garden for as long as we can. They provide a lot of food for birds and shelter for wildlife. But once they start to get really trashed by the weather and they're not providing anything anymore, then we will cut them down. And that's when we tend to mulch the ground. So we have large compost heaps here. We're very lucky to be able to produce our own compost. So we start digging out those compost heaps and putting the organic matter around the perennials and any areas of garden that we're working on. The primary thing is over the winter is to protect the soil so it doesn't get so hammered by the rains. And the other thing is that the worms over the winter will do the work for you. So they'll pull the organic matter down into the soil. What you're really aiming for, the soil is full of mycorrhizal fungi, which help plants. They're the connection between the plants and the soil. So anything the plant uptakes from the soil is via mycorrhizal fungi. And so you're protecting that and sort of nurturing the soil. It's the primary thing that we have to do is look after our soil. So yeah, as I said, we're also lucky here to be, we have a farm. Perchill is part of the farm, so we have access to cow manure. So we mix that in with our compost, and that will feed the soil. The thing that you need to be aware of if you're still planting new plants. If we have heavy rains over the winter, then a lot of the nutrients from that mulch will be washed away. So you might need, if they're hungry plants that you're planting, you might need to reapply an organic mulch in the spring. But we generally do it just once a year, and that works well for us. So look after your soil.
Brilliant. Really important. So my next thing that I'm going to be doing in the next few days is planting my Paperwhite Narcissi. And last year, I just had such success. I put something like 7 bulbs of my Paperwhites in the base of a leaf planter, and I really love them. They look, I don't know, they're just quite elegant, but also quite sculptural, the planters, I mean. And then I actually put another slightly smaller one just inside. And so it's like a tiered wedding cake. And the base one, I put 7 Paperwhite bulbs all the way around the outside of the central one. And then I put another 5 in the central one. And what I then did is I went into the wood and I gathered lots of silver birch together, and I poked it in and I wove it into a nest, because actually silver birch is dropping its leaves now, but even with the leaves, it looks nice. And from the moment I planted it, it looked fabulous. And the key thing with Paperwhites is they need cold, but they don't need dark. So actually I had them on the table in the greenhouse, which I could walk past and enjoy them as they began to shoot and then come into flower. And then I brought them into the house. So I'm going to be planting my Paperwhites in the next few days. And they should, fingers crossed, be in flower for Christmas, because they take, depending on the temperature and the light that you give them, they take 4 to 6 weeks from planting to flowering.
Meanwhile, we're out in the garden pruning roses. We start in November, and we carry on because we've got a lot of roses here. We've got over 100 varieties of roses. Though looking at the garden, you wouldn't think there were that many, but because they're dotted through every garden. We've got a lot of roses to prune. We use the prunings and we start early because we use the prunings to top our bulb pots to keep the squirrels off. And so that's our primary reason for starting so early. But we just prune whenever we get round to it from now onwards. And it's just the classic of taking out the disease stems and trying to keep an open goblet shape. This is just for hybrid teas and floribundas. So I think people get rather put off, don't they, by all the different types and all the, should I prune? Should I prune this? Should I prune that? Just they have, people do it with hedge cutters, just taking the tops off. That's fine. But every 3 years or so, you have to go through and take out the centres. You need an airy open bush. But yeah, just don't be afraid of your roses. They'll thank you for being quite hard on them.
Good. And my final one, which admittedly I get to towards the end of the month, and sometimes even into December, is sowing sweet peas. And what we have found with sweet peas is actually, if we can possibly sow them in late autumn into winter, we do tend to get more robust plants that are longer flowering with longer stems and more prolific, basically. And so I've discovered lots of incredible new ones. I'm obsessed by Erewhon, which is this amazing blue and mauve together. I don't know, it's just really sophisticated and incredible. I absolutely love it, as well as my tip-top favourite for always, which is Machacana, which is the most highly scented sweet pea in the world. So I'm sowing those into root trainers in the next few weeks, but they will be the last of the jobs that I've mentioned this morning. And into root trainers, 1 seed into each cell, because then I don't need to do any sort of fussing about tearing the roots apart. And then in January, February, I'll pop them on into a deep 1 litre pot and then out into the garden in March. So that would be my last job for this time of year.
Yes, and we'll be planting. Anything bare root season starts in November and runs round to March. So now's a great time to get things like roses and shrubs. Lots of things are offered bare root. They're cheaper, obviously, and they've usually been grown in a field. So they're taken out of the field and they go straight into your soil. So they're not grown on what I call softly in compost, in pots of compost. So they tend to take really well. So it will definitely be planting our bare roots, and it's just a case of digging a hole in the ground and laying out the roots, look at the roots, see what shape they are, especially with a rose. They're not a standard shaped root. Make the hole to fit the rose, get them in, get a bit of organic mulch around them, and the winter rains will do the watering for you, hopefully. Just keep an eye on roses and shrubs and trees, if you're planting trees, during the first year. So all of next year, make sure that they do get enough water in case we have a dry season. But yes, that's what we're getting on with out in the garden in November.
Fabulous. Thank you, Josie. And thank you very much for listening, everybody. And see you next week. If you've enjoyed this episode of Grow, Cook, Eat, Arrange, I'd really love it if you reviewed, rated and subscribed on wherever you listen to your podcasts. It'll help new listeners to know that we're here and enable us to keep getting the very best and most interesting guests week after week.